I'm Chris Ritchie, and I'm from Rusk, Texas. In October, right after my birthday, I was diagnosed with HIV. We're going down Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood, and there's a mobile testing unit right in front of the millions of milkshakes. And we wanted to get some pizza over there and then maybe a milkshake. And I, was like looking at the mobile testing unit, and I was like, I should probably get tested, even though I'd never done a mobile testing unit in my life before. And my friend said, if you feel like you need to, do it. And I was like, well, Leo, I was so sick in September, and that was really random. So, why not? So I went in, and the girl sat me down. She took blood first, had to wait 20 minutes, and she came back and she said it was reactive. I think I went through shock first, because I had been tested a million times before and nothing had ever come back that way. And I was just assuming that it would come back negative like it always had. And it didn't. And she then swabbed my mouth, I believe, was the next test, and just to make sure. And it was reactive again. And I think at that point I just kind of lost it. And it wasn't until it really was in my own room, my bedroom. This guy says something about someone that I play dodgeball with in West Hollywood that I know is HIV positive, but I don't know if everybody does, and it's no one else's business. But apparently this guy knew that he was, and he says, this guy right here has AIDS. That's so disgusting. And he just goes on a tangent, not realizing that I'm HIV positive. And at that point, I kind of took a deep breath, wanting to lash out and be very hateful and mean. I went over and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take my HIV meds and go to bed. And he was like, you're kidding, right? And I was like, no, I'm not. And I went over to my medicine cabinet, pulled out my medicine, and I took my pills in front of him. And I was like, you know what? I have to do this every day. And I was like, and so does he. And you know what? Just because you were dancing with him does not mean you're going to get HIV. It took a while for me to get used to that and to come to terms with my diagnosis and understand what it was. But I think I've finally gotten over that hump, and I'm doing stuff that's very healing for me now.
And we are focusing on issues that come up in LGBT individuals, LGBTSGL individuals, and relationships. HIV/AIDS. The human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, is the virus that causes acquired immune deficiency syndrome. AIDS. The rate of HIV infection is increasing most rapidly among women who have sex with men and men of color who have sex with men. HIV/AIDS. Reducing your risk of STD exposure, STI exposure. HIV can be transmitted through vaginal, anal, and in some cases, oral sexual contact, sharing needles with an infected person, pregnancy, and breastfeeding. Although there is no cure for HIV infection or AIDS, there have been recent advances in medications that can slow the disease in most people. Once HIV is in your body, it invades and kills cells of your immune system, your body's natural defense against disease. Once infected, you may have no symptoms for many years while the virus continues to weaken your immune system. Eventually, the virus develops into AIDS, a condition in which your immune system is so weakened that other life-threatening conditions, such as infections or cancer, can occur. Because there is no cure for HIV, it is important to be tested anytime you take part in sexual activity you consider to be risky. how you both perceive and your strengths at maintaining growth may be several different things. So, in negotiating sex and sexual positions, you want to talk about sexual safety. So, this 90 days, I would say around, third, fourth date, we start talking about HIV, PrEP. PrEP, or pre-exposure prophylaxis. PrEP, an acronym for pre-exposure prophylaxis, is the use of prescription drugs by people who do not have HIV/AIDS as a strategy for the prevention of HIV/AIDS. It's an optional treatment which may be taken by people who are HIV negative, but who have substantial higher than average risk of contracting an HIV infection. Currently, the only drug which any health organization recommends for PrEP is Truvada, which is the brand name of the Gilead Sciences drug combination of tenofovir epitreticamide. The Centers for Disease Control says that PrEP is a powerful HIV prevention tool and can be combined with condoms and other prevention methods to provide even greater protection than when used alone. But people who use PrEP must commit to taking the drug every day and seeing their healthcare provider for follow-up every 3 months. PrEP is intended for use with condoms. Contrary to all medical advice, PrEP is sometimes used by those who do not wish to use condoms and who intend to have bareback sex. There are social groups who both support and oppose the use of PrEP. In the United States, federal guidelines recommend the use of PrEP for HIV-negative people with the following characteristics. In a serodiscordant sexual relationship, meaning that the HIV-negative person regularly has sex with an HIV-positive person, anyone who is not in a monogamous relationship with an HIV-negative person, and who is a man who has sex with men and has had bareback sex in the past 6 months, has had any sexually transmitted infection in the past 6 months, does not regularly use condoms during sex, and who has sex with people of unknown HIV status who are at high risk of contracting HIV, has shared recreational drug interaction equipment with other drug users, or who has been in treatment for injection drug use in the past 6 months. Reasons to avoid PrEP. Reasons for not using PrEP include the following. Persons with HIV should never use PrEP, and an HIV test is necessary before starting to use PrEP. Persons with kidney problems, especially decreased renal functions, have increased safety problems with using PrEP. Persons with hepatitis B have increased safety problems with using PrEP. Women who are pregnant or breastfeeding should speak with their doctors about potential risk to their children. Minors may not have access to services which complement the effective use of PrEP and need extra attention from their doctor if they use PrEP. Adverse effects. The PrEP studies have shown the drug to be safe, with few side effects. Generally, minor side effects such as nausea or diarrhea resolve themselves within the first few months. Any deleterious effect of Truvada on kidney function usually reverses with drug discontinuation, but irreversible kidney damage can rarely occur. History. The terms of pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, most commonly refer to an HIV prevention strategy, where antiretrovirals are used to protect HIV-negative people from HIV infection. The HIV antiviral Truvada was approved by the FDA for PrEP on the 16th of July 2012. The CDC amended its guidelines for HIV prevention, recommending pre-exposure prophylaxis with Truvada to high infection risk populations on May 14, 2014, due to research indicating prophylactic effectively preventing transmission from mother to child. Prior to that date, Truvada was only approved to treat existing HIV infections. PrEP has been gaining a lot of attention and focus, especially within the battle against AIDS in the New York City area, a metropolis known for the epidemic's fatality. Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York has pledged his vow to end AIDS by 2020. According to a New York Times article, Cuomo intends to dramatically drop the infection number to 750 by 2020 from about 3,000 in 2013 and 14,000 in 1993. In a city that has a large gay population, Cuomo intends to target his gay male audience. In addition to the use of condoms, Cuomo hopes that PrEP will continue to reduce the number of infections. However, the drug has met some sort of resistance, as users may be noted as Truvada whores, or people who miss their daily uptake of the drug and still do not use a condom. Overall, the fight against HIV infection seems to be going strong. Infection rates have fallen 28% overall from 2007 to 2012. Hello, it's Kyle Phoenix, and we are in part 3, Dating 401. And because this is kind of where you mature from the dating process and step-by-step going out, meeting people, where to meet them, all that stuff like that, talking about what your goals are, what your interests are. We talked about categories of dating, we talked about casual dating, affair dating, friends with benefits, hookups, and we're talking about now that when we've reached kind of a serious level of dating, and we have had dating at least 2 or 3 times a week. We're talking on the phone, we're going places, but we're being non-sexual until we have these 3 agreements in place, which generally we should wait until about 90 days. So we've talked about safe sex, sexual position, sexual history, sexual safety that we are giving to one another. I am also practicing safe sex because I'm taking care of you, and you are practicing safe sex, so you are taking care of me. So we talked about where the most concentrated areas, particularly in New York City, are with things like HIV and why. And I got a question about that, about how does, and so I will explain this as quickly as possible so that we can get into courtship, which involves continuity and commitment, which is, we call it day 91. Okay, so the reason why the HIV infection rate is so high, it is from a 2016 CDC study, and they're continuing studies, that within the lifetime of all Black and Latino men who are engaging in sex with other men, there will be a 50% HIV rate, with the highest numbers occurring between 18 and 27 years old, is because of, there's a youth coordinator for youth who were between 14 and 27. So they were an intensive target group for me to teach, deal with, whether they're HIV, or teach them about their practices to stay HIV negative. So here's what happens. There are 10 groups, and I actually do this in a blog, and I'll probably turn the blog into a video because it's easier to explain, but you'll have to, I'll flash it for you so you get some visuals with this as well. There are 10 people, 10 men in Harlem, and we'll give them 10 names. We'll call them John 1 through 10. We'll call them Jamal 1 through 10 so we can racialize it. Okay, so what happens is Jamal 1 through 10. So Jamal 1 and 2, they're a couple. Jamal 1 used to date Jamal number 3, so they had sex. Jamal number 1 also used to date Jamal number 4. Jamal number 4, he's never met 2 and 3, but he's had sex with 5 and 6, and now he's in a relationship with number 7. Number 7 has met number 2 and 3 and had sex with them, and also with number 8. Number 8 is prolific. He's had sex, and I've actually had a couple of clients like this who, not in a negative way, but are just in a fun sexual way over a span of time in a neighborhood. 8 has had sex with 7, 6, 5, 4, and 3. Maybe he goes to sex parties. 9 has only had sex with 1, 5, and 7. Jamal number 10 has had sex with, let's say, 1 through 5. All of these 10 Jamals have circled within each other, the 10 span of each other. So they've kind of all done this with each other. Okay, now let's do Bob. Bob's are white. Bob's 1 through 10. Bob, number 1, He's had sex with Bob number 9 in the neighborhood. They live in someplace like Chelsea. Bob number 2 has had sex with Bob number 3. Bob number 3 is in a relationship with Bob number 4. Bob number 4 has had sex with Jamal number 5. Bob number 6 has had sex with Juan number 3, who lives in Washington Heights. Bob number 7 has had sex with Pedro, who's visiting from Germany. I don't know why Pedro lives in Germany, but he's Spanish and lives in Germany. Okay. Bob number 7 and 8, they've only had sex in Brazil when they go on their little Brazilian wild rampant sex tours. Bob's number 9 and 10, they're in a relationship. They have an open relationship. They have an open safe-sex relationship. And Bob number 10 is HIV positive. What happens with the 10 white guys is they've done this. So they haven't all done this. They've done a little bit of this. This is how their sex lives have been. So there's some space between them. Now, Juan, they say that they live in Washington Heights. They're Latino, Dominican, Panamanian. They're Puerto Rican. We'll just call it Latino. Juan's 1, 2, and 3 have all had sex together. 4 and 5 have had sex with 1, 2, and 3. 6 and 7 have had sex with 4 and 5. 7 and 8 and 9 have all had sex, and 10 has had sex with all of them. However, and this actually came up because when I was a youth coordinator and all of the numbers are constantly coming out from the CDC, Washington Heights, where I lived, had a nightclub. It's no longer open. It's defunct. It's called No Parking, and had a great owner and everything like that. But it was predominantly in a Latino neighborhood, so there was a concentration of young Latino men and some women who may have been bisexual or lesbian, or just straight visiting with their friends, who were all partying together. So what the Latino men did, thinking this is how they would combat HIV, they said, hey, I won't have anal sex. I won't allow myself to be penetrated or penetrate anymore. I won't penetrate anally, but I won't allow myself to be penetrated because that's how you get HIV. So what they did instead was they would have more oral sex, fellatio, and analingus. What they did not account for in Spanish was gonorrhea, chlamydia, herpes, and mono. So that square area, a few square blocks around 176th Street, I think the club was on, became ground central on the planet for gonorrhea and chlamydia. So now you have the imagery of all these 10. So the 10 Latinos, they did this basically. So the blacks did this and the whites did that. What happens is that within a circle of 10, on average, people within a neighborhood or with an ethnic concentration, we tend to, and this is where racism comes in, and this stuff is about the civil rights movement that was never brought up in the pamphlets and the banners, we concentrate sexually, ethnically. And by doing so, we, blacks and Latinos, concentrate sexually transmitted infections. White people, particularly white men, probably because of some levels of privilege and entitlement around how they play with their sexuality, because we often don't define what privilege and entitlement means and how it's acted out in lives, they try different things out. So, Bob, he tried that German guy from Pedro, and sometimes he goes up to Harlem. And once he's been over to Washington Heights, and 2 of them, they went down to Brazil. So they don't concentrate with each other. And by not concentrating with each other, they're not crossing lines with those of their group, of their ethnic group, that might be STI infected, which is why their rates were able to go. So they're practicing safe sex, and they're not concentrating. In Black and Latino cohorts, neighborhoods, ethnicities, they're concentrating and not practicing safe sex as much. So, why don't Blacks and Latinos practice safe sex? Lots of different reasons. So I would advise you to go look up those reasons if you're Black Latino or if you're dealing with somebody who's Black Latino, because this is part of the discussion that you need to have in your relationship. So now we've hit 90 days and we're moving into commitment. What does commitment look like? Commitment is we are in this together. We are not doing this kind of, sort of, maybe. No, we are in this, and there's a plan for this. So we talked a little bit before about what goals are. So maybe this is a time where you kind of outline some of your life goals. And when we talk about HIV and PrEP, we then remind the other person that HIV, wow, it may be preventable with PrEP. PrEP does not prevent syphilis, chlamydia, HPV, herpes, gonorrhea. So, and also some strains of HIV. They sell, it's 99% perfect. It's not 99% perfect. Even condoms are only 77% perfect because they have to be porous so that HIV can get between the pores of condoms. That was a fast sex speech. So you want to discuss this. You want to discuss this I had a participant in a workshop. We did the workshop, and afterwards, after people talked to me after workshops, he said, you know something? I have herpes. How do I bring that up? I said, well, you got to have a few dates first, because that shouldn't be your, first date discussion. But it should be something where somebody has the time to get to know you, and then you can discuss with them how herpes has outbreak times, the safety measures that you can take. You don't want them just to have a flash discussion or judgment about your herpes status. You want them to know you so they can hear from you. And they may decide, something, that's a risk I'm not going to take. You then also want to have discussions with people about when was your last HIV test. Just because somebody says they're on PrEP, we need to see prescriptions. Because here's what I will tell you, and I will tell you this specifically for two reasons. One, people like having sex, people like fucking. So people lie about a lot of shit when it comes to sex. And here's a caveat that you have to think about with LGBTSGL people, which I bring up in workshops too. These people who have a non-heterosexual sexuality, have at some point in time had to hide their identity for either psychic, social, psychological, social, community, church, safety, to keep themselves sane and alive. So I would say, some point in time this will be recognized by the intelligence community. Non-heterosexual people are generally very good liars to themselves and to others because they've had to do it to the people closest to them, which is why, open parentheses, discreet, DL, married, he's lying to you. I would even ask to see ID on somebody's name. He's lying to you. And the reason why he's lying to you is because he's lying to people that he stood up in front of a ceremony and had a marriage and there was a party and a reception, his parents, his church, his pastor, his brothers, his sisters, his friends, his co-workers. He's lied to all of them about what he likes. And you think that the twist in your head has him telling God's truth to you. He might tell you some truths. He might reveal some things he can't reveal to them, but he's lying to you. So we have to treat everybody, trust but verify. And the reason why we have to do that is because the CDC in 2016, in their statistical estimates, and I will tell you that whatever you think of large institutions, we ain't got no large institutions in the Black community that can refute these numbers. And until we create think tanks, hospitals, and large organizations that can refute these numbers, you're going to have to understand that there's a reason why the CDC is funding all of these things. Because not every, and this is a whole racial spiel, more parentheses, not every white person is out to destroy you. Because you're not all worth destroying. See, you got to be, I go really deep into workshops about SUV from Law and Order, the Special Victims Unit. So sometimes people want to racially be the Special Victims Unit and not deal with the truth of what is being told to them based upon studied behaviors. Because part of what CDC scientists and doctors and nurses and technicians and administrators get off on is studying populations. One of the populations they have studied are Black and Latino people, MSN, men who have sex with men, and what they have come to the conclusion of is that as the activities are now and the HIV infections that people are aware of, and the people who don't know their HIV status, which is about 1 in 5 people.
What do I do? Cry in front of you so that you understand what it's like to have this type of pain inside of me? Do I cower?
Wow, explosive comments today from that man who knowingly infected his lover with HIV. He says it's not his fault that he's not sorry. 10 News reporter Vanessa Van Hefty is now live at the Hall of Justice. And Vanessa, the victim was in the courtroom as well and had strong words for his ex.
Yeah, an emotional day for him, Steve, in a landmark case. This was the first willful HIV transmission case in the state of California.
That I am not a monster.
Thomas Guerra says he's not a sociopathic monster, one who knowingly infected his lover with HIV and laughed about it to friends. He blames his victim.
I'm not remorseful. Understand the medical facts and accept the fact that he just can't take responsibility for his actions. I did not rape this person. I did not take him up against his will. Within 5 minutes of Grindr text messaging, he was there. So, I mean, if you're that reckless with your life, how can you blame anyone else for your actions?
We are protecting his ex's identity and have disguised his voice. He says Guerra never told him he was HIV positive. He pointed to the more than 11,000 text messages from Guerra mocking those he infected.
These text messages and emails document Mr. Guerra convincing an alarming number of younger men that he was in love with them so that he could lower their resistance for taking an unprotected sex and give them his pause. There is absolutely nothing even remotely humorous about this.
The judge blasted Guerra for his lack of remorse, saying she wished she could have locked him up longer than the law allows.
In my career of 25 plus years, I have seen even somebody who's been convicted of murder be so lacking of insight or blame or responsibility.
And had the DA charged Guerra with a felony, he would have been looking at up to 8 years behind bars. But this was a misdemeanor, meaning 6 months was the max. And the judge called that sentencing a travesty, considering the damage that was done here. Reporting live from the Hall of Justice, Vanessa Van Hefty, 10 News.